Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. Today, I'm trying to summarize my understanding of Gita, of psychology, of world, of philosophy, all in one diagram. So this is it. Okay, this is the diagram that we're going to be talking about. I'm calling it the hexagonal model. It's not a particularly innovative way of calling it, but I don't know, the name will develop over time. And I'm going to make 4 points. The first point is the radial integration is fundamental. The second point is that life moves in circle. The third point is about primary color axis and secondary color axis. And the last one I'm calling peripheral graveyards. So let me tell you about each of them. And they are in that order. Radial integration. So what does radial mean? Radial means is in this direction. So from center out to the periphery. That integration, so it is integration. See, really the core idea behind everything I'm saying is integration. And what I'm saying, first thing I'm saying is that the radial integration, that means from the center to you and to the periphery, that integration is fundamental. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter what else you have nothing. Okay, so first point, I'm going to spend a lot of time on the first point. And even if we end up doing just the first point today, I think it will be worth it, because that point about radial integration is very foreign to the modern world. It is very different from how the modern world thinks. Modern world thinks in an analytical way, disintegrated way. So the idea of integrating, this is the idea of spirit and matter being one. That is a radical idea. And if you get only that, if we cover only that, it's going to be worth it. So I'm going to present first just that idea, and then we are going to go to the, we're going to have a lot of back and forth on that. Please use pen and paper to keep track. I'm going to go through many different things that we have studied. I'm going to try to make many different connections, and I would love to have all kinds of questions on these topics. So the first point is about radial. So radial is this direction. The second is that life moves in cycles. So the second one is also about integration, but it is this circular integration that you have to bring together. All parts of your life are connected. And if you don't deal with them as a whole in a cycle, you don't have an integration. That's the second kind of integration. The primary integration is the radial integration. The second integration, the way in which it is actually implemented, is this circular integration. So both the point 1 and point 2 are about integrations. Then the next 2 points are about differentiation. And again, the point I want to emphasize is that if you don't get the integration, no matter what you do in differentiation, it's not going to help you. It's actually going to hurt you, because by focusing on one part of the differentiation, you can very easily destroy the integration, both radial as well as the cyclic. Okay, so the first 2 points are about integration. The third point is about these color axes. So this are the primary colors. This are the secondary colors. I think the secondary colors is new with me. I have not seen that before. So that is something new that I'm presenting. And the final point is about, I'm calling peripheral graveyards. These areas I'm calling peripheral graveyards. And I will explain that. Again, all these point 3 and 4 are secondary points. Even if we don't get to them today, that's fine. I'm committed to doing whatever presentations in order to in order to make all of these things clear. But I want to make sure that I'm actually communicating. So we're going to go, I have 4 slides after this. This is an introductory slide. I have 4 slides for each of them. And I'll be talking at length, and I will be scribbling on the diagrams. And then I'm going to, after each of the slides, I'm going to open it up for comments and questions, okay? So I would like to know what your overall comments are, and then I would like to know any questions. All right, so let's get started. So the first point is about radial integration. Okay, radial again is from here to here, this way, this direction. So what do I mean by that? The best thinker on this by far is Louis Sullivan. Now, for those people who are not familiar, Louis Sullivan is a transcendentalist. He's heavily influenced by people like Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman. We're all transcendentalists. The transcendentalists took Indian philosophy and integrated it into the American culture. So they are actually very good way of accessing Indian thought. And Sullivan is by far my favorite and person I've spent most time on. And his principle is form follows function. Okay. So I want to, this is for the first time I'm able to draw it that in a way that I'm very happy with. So I have 3 different points on Sullivan. So I'm going to go through that. Then I'm going to talk about 1 point from Gita. Then I'm going to give a summary of Gospel of John using this same concept of radial movement. Then I'm going to talk about how this relates to chapter 10 and 11 of Gita. Then I'm going to talk about Aristotle versus the dualist. So Aristotle versus Plato, and Aristotle versus the materialist or subjectivist. And then finally, I'm going to conclude with 2 observations. Okay, so let me get started. What does form follows function mean? See, function is this living principle at the center here. Okay, and what you do is that you apply that to life in order to form this form here. You see this hexagon which is there? That is the functionated form. That is the full result of applying form follows function. This outward movement is the process of working out the form. So you're starting with the function, you're creating the form, and then you are taking in the feedback from the form, and you use that in order to keep on making the form conform to the function. Okay. Now, if you don't watch out, what happens is that the forms, there is a drift. They stop, they progressively, even forms which are beautifully designed to follow the function, they tend to drift and they get away from the function. So that is this area over here, which I'm calling the graveyard. Okay, that is also another name for it is periphery. So this is periphery. This dark area outside, this area outside is the periphery. Okay. This, the center here is the function or the center. And this is your life. This is your life according to the center. when you are focused on the center of saying, this is my function, how do I design things? How do I design my life, design everything around me according to the function? Okay, so that's a quick take of form follows function. I'm going to now explain it in terms of biology. Again, Louis Sullivan does a fantastic job of doing that. One of the things he keeps saying in his design work is remember the seed germ. Always remember the seed germ. This is the seed of the tree. Okay. The tree grows, and this form, which is there, is the full tree when it begins to give you fruit and produce, and consequently produce more seed. Okay. So this is the seed. This over here, this part is the tree which is giving fruit, fruitful form that you produce, which is actually serving your function. And it's continuously producing more seed. And then over time, all trees die. This is death. Okay, this whole area outside is death. So this is putting it in the form of biology. All right. Next, I want to give you another quote from Louis Sullivan. In his autobiography, he says, life began to break in on him, on himself. And a continuous breaking in of the life from outside and breaking out of life from inside was to shape his destiny. So what does this mean? Breaking in means you are alive to what is happening with the form. So you're continuously taking in what is going out, what is going on around you. What happens is that occasionally your form goes out of whack and you are letting that break in on you. You're noticing that. Okay. And then breaking out from inside. That means you're forming the universal idea of what is going on and you are reshaping the form. So if you look at the diagram here, think of it in terms of light. You see the center over here is light. And what you're producing here, this is your life, is a form which is full of light. And that is being formed by this light, which is moving in both directions. It is moving out and it is moving in. This is what a living form is like. This center is the spirit. This is the matter. This edge is the matter. This process is process of spirit shaping the matter. And this process is the spirit noticing what is happening with the matter. So this direction is the process of induction. You're trying to ask, what is it? What is it? What is it? And trying to figure things out. And this is the center is you're figuring that out. That is the truth. And you're using that in order to shape your life. And that's why this entire area is full of light. The other area outside is colorful, but it is darker. That's where there is, you start to lose the connection with the light. So this is the view of Sullivan. So this is a way of capturing this dance. So I'm saying the following things. I'm saying that there is a center, which is a function. You are building the form of your life, which is between these two, this hexagon. You're doing it through the action, moving out and moving in. Moment you stop doing that, you start to die. In order to live, you have to be continuously focused on the function, on the center. There is a drift, there is a natural drift that we have of going away from the center, getting attached to your thoughts, to your emotions, through your habits. And that is all going away from the center. And this back and forth is the thing that actually integrates form and function, spirit and matter, and makes it a living whole. That is what life is. That is what spiritual life is. That is what life is. That is the kind of life that Gita, Bible, Tao Te Ching are talking about. And this is as it is presented by Louis Sullivan. So what I want to do now is I want to take any comments and questions, and then I will go to the next one, because these are all different ways of describing the same thing. So go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question. I want this to be interactive because this is such a difficult topic. I just want to make sure that people are getting what I'm saying. It's much better to ask questions as you have them. If I find that the question is about one of the later topics, about the cyclical movement or about parts, I will say, please remember this question and come back on slide 3 or slide 4 or something like that. Okay, but please, I would love to hear your comments and get your questions. We're going to start with Madhav. Madhav, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. So the white dot in the very middle, that's the center, Atma, or the soul.
Yes.
And the inner hexagon is your instruments, so your mind, your body. And the bigger hexagon is the world. And when we're on the, what did you call it, the peripheral grave, that's when we get attached or overindulge. And our goal should be, and what religion tries to get us to do, is get closer to the smaller hexagon and eventually the smaller center.
Sure. I'll modify it, and it's basically, I agree with whatever you've said, but I have a slightly different, nuanced way of looking at it. What I'm saying is that the Atma or Brahma is in the center, and it also is expressed in Prakriti, in nature, through it acting on nature. And then it's yours loving the center and yours being continuously focused on the core of your being is this movement back. If you get attached to things, you start moving this way. So this is, the attachment is this way. All of this is part of the world. This is you living according to the highest principle. Whenever you fail to do that, you are in this area, but you always have the ability of remembering your center and moving back towards it. I don't know if that answer that, do you have any further, follow-up?
Yeah, so you're trying to say it's the integration, as you mentioned before, that the center integrates with the periphery. It's not just going to the center.
Right, exactly. It is, what happens is that, and this point I'll make very explicitly later on, there is, like, a lot of the modern thinking is that it is disintegrated. So it says there is periphery and there is center. But if you see this part, this is integration of the material and the spiritual. So it's a state of being where these two things are integrated. And that's an achievement. That's what a living thing is. When you're not doing that, when you're attached to something that is not that, then you are in the process of dying. So this is really the ethical issue. You're standing here. You have the ability of going this way, this way. Those are the two directions. You can go towards the center or away from the center. But we are going to come at this topic from many, many different angles. This is just the first. This is just Louis Sullivan's terminology. But Madhav, we are going to come at it first through Gita, then through Bible, then again through Gita. So we'll have multiple ways of coming at it. If it is not answered a little bit later on, I will go ahead. Please raise it again, okay? Thank you. Next up is Joe, followed by Daniel. Joe.
This may not be a good question, but where would like kind of bhakti and karma yoga and jnana yoga fall into this diagram?
Sure. So this is bhakti yoga, this is jnana yoga, and this is karma yoga.
Okay.
And we are going to deal with that in slide 3.
Okay.
Those
All
are
right.
the I'm calling the primary axis.
Okay, that gets to Madhav's question. It was the same kind of question, Madhav's question. It was just, yeah, you just mapped it out. Fine.
Yeah,
Thank
exactly.
you.
So that's exactly, we are going to go into that in slide 3. Next up is Daniel. Daniel, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Curious, studying something like the transcendentalism or the, it sounds like this model is inspired by that. Was that correct?
What, so Daniel, I know that you are relatively new to our meetup. We've done about like 35 meetups on Gita.
Mm-hmm.
We've done like maybe about 80 meetups on Dao De Jing. We've done about like 40 meetups on Gospel of John. We've done about 50 meetups on Louis Sullivan. And this is like the distillation of all of that.
Okay, so my question, which in studying something like this, which direction would we be heading on this hexagon? Just the nature of studying this.
Nature of studying this, that's a very good question. Largely it is this, but I will go into that when I discuss, in slide 3, when I talk about, this is also called Jnana Yoga. This is about understanding. This is your mind. The blue is the mind. So it is mostly understanding is about the mind. But the point here, which I'm going to make in the second slide, is that that is very much connected to these other two. So I'll first explore the connection of understanding with devotion or love and moral action, and how these three go together. And then we will dive into the nature of understanding, but it is largely here. Thank you. Anybody else has any questions before we go on? Because we are going to come at the same topic in multiple ways. So let me go ahead, if nobody has questions at this stage. Please keep track of all your questions. We'll have plenty of opportunities of coming at it. All right. So next, I want to make a very simple point here. There are 3 gods in Indian mythology, Indian religion. And these are Trimurti. So these are like the same idea of Trinity. Those are actually one, but those are 3 aspects. This start is Brahma. This is where all creation is starting. This is the full form of Vishnu, something that keeps things sustained. And this is the destruction and transformation. So you can think of it as, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva or Mahesh. This is destruction. And so this process is going on all the time. And all of this is God. So all of this is divine. All of this is in nature of the world itself. So it's a very small point, but it's a very short point, but it's a very profound point, that what it is saying is that creation, sustenance, and destruction are part of the world, and world proceeds through the operation of these three, but all of them together are one. So it's the same idea of Trinity. So that's a very quick point. Now I'm going to go into details of the Bible. We've studied Gospel of John. So I'm going to formulate this whole thing now from John. So in the beginning was the Word. Word is this little hexagon over here. This is Jesus. This is the ideal. This is the light inside of it. And the Word was with God. The light inside of it. There is a source of light inside the small hexagon. That is God the Father. And what this hexagon is like a mirror to God. So the Word is self-consciousness of God. And at the same time, everything outside can see God only through the Word. So this little hexagon here is the Word. And everything was made through him. So everything was made through him. So what it is saying is this: everything is made through him. And then Word became flesh. So Word came and lived here. And why? God so loved the world. So God is right here in the center, and he so loved the world that he sent his only son. So why did he send? So that the world could find a way back to God, to love God. So it is all about the same loop. It's the same loop. So Holy Spirit is this love is Holy Spirit. So God the Father is inside of this small hexagon. God the Son is this small hexagon. This is the world. But world has both things. So like he was here, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. So the world, which was standing here, looked this way. And the whole purpose of Jesus is to get people to look this way. This direction is called grace in Christianity. So grace of God is raining on you, but you need the Holy Spirit in your heart. This is in chapter 4, the living water in your heart. That is this going back. At any point of time, you really have a choice. You turn towards the light, or you turn away from it. You turn towards God, or you turn away from it. You turn towards the truth. You pursue what is good or not. So it is the same, the entire story, the core story of the Gospel of John is simply this. Like, for example, on this Sunday, we are going to be talking about John 13, where Jesus starts to wash the feet of his disciples. And what is he saying to them? So here is Jesus, here is the disciple. He's showing his love for the disciples. Why? Because he wants to show them how to love each other. And what kind of a love is this? This is the same love that the Son has for the Father. That's what he's trying to transmit. And that is just Holy Spirit. So at once, this movement is creating individual movement towards God and community at the same time. So when, for example, again, I'm just jumping ahead a little bit, when you see the description of Jesus's ministry for the first time in chapter 4 with the woman from Samaria, what is the sequence? She hears the word. This is the word. She sees that it is true. She believes in it and loves it. And she walks to the village and tells people about it, who here say that looks like this is true. So they actually walk to Jesus. They hear what he says, understands it, starts to love that, and asks him to stay. So this is a continuous going back and forth between mind, heart, and body, all moving towards truth, towards goodness, towards beauty, which is the center. And when that is there, you have this lighted hexagon. When you don't, you go away. When it is an act of tremendous responsibility. This is, so this, let me just leave it here. So this is a quick overview of how this inner, let me just wipe this out. Oops. This is the description of what Jesus is arguing for. This is what he's teaching. He's saying there is a God, you are here, you can go away from God or move towards him. Use the word, this is the blue, have love and walk in that direction in order to get to God. That's it. So this is a way of capturing, this is my understanding of Gospel of John based on this diagram. So I want to open it up again for any questions, any comments on this part. You're welcome to ask any question. Let me see. Ebony, go ahead.
Yeah, so what I saw from that when you had the diagram for John, it's about where what I'm getting is about where your focus is. If your focus is on the center, you're going to desire things that go towards the center. But if you allow yourself to drift and not keep that focus, that's where you start desiring things that take you away from the center and bring you towards that destructive. But my question is going, when you were talking about the Gita.
Let me do one thing. Let me just comment on that. It's a great observation. Let me just comment on that, and then will you be able to remember your question?
I'll write it down.
Okay. So you're absolutely right. It's all about focus. That's all it is. So look at it visually. You are standing here, okay? Or more precisely, you're standing somewhere here like this, okay? You have in you the drifting capability. You have in you the capacity to focus on the center or focus on the ideal, on the truth. The choice is between focus on the purpose, on the truth, or drift. That is the fundamental choice. See, there is a great book by Napoleon Hill called Outwitting the Devil. And that's really the summary of the whole thing. It is simply you either turn towards God or not. And if you do not explicitly, because it is a lot of work, because no matter what you've done in the past, you're still like this. You have parts, if you do not exert effort of focus, and both your mind, your heart, and your body, if you don't use focus and purpose, you will drift. So that exactly the focus on God, focus on the light, focus on truth, or drift. That is exactly, you got it beautifully. Go ahead. What was your question?
So my question was, in the Gita, you were talking about, let me go back, where you said, creation, sustenance, and destruction, and that they're all kind of essential. So if you look at the two models, John and Gita, my question is, even though drifting is not the ideal, is it necessary to have that in order to have the destruction that's needed?
Very, very good question. Very good question. So the way in which Gita looks at it is that he's like, Krishna is saying that I am everything. So everything is a part of him. So this is the whole world. This is all part of him. So this capability that we have is a part of world, part of nature, part of our own nature. So we have to accept that it is there. So it is a natural part of life, just like trees, right? Trees die, animals die. So death is a natural part. And the view that Gita has is that it has a cyclical view. It's saying that being born, living, and then dying is a natural cycle that happens within our minds, within in so many different metaphorical ways in every moment of our lives, across lifetime, and then at the end of the life as well. So it holds that if you do good things, then you come closer and closer to the center. If you do bad things, so it is very much, Gita is very much of a spiral kind of a movement. So you can be going out like that, or you can be coming in like that towards God. But all of it, what he's saying by that Trimurti idea is that death is a natural part of the world. This is a view of the world that's part of the world. Okay. Next up is Joe.
Actually, I think you answered what I was going to ask, so I'm fine.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. All right, so I'll go to the next point. Now, this is a very complex point because I don't understand it too well. If you look at chapter 10, right, Yogeshwar did such a magnificent job of going through chapter 10. And if you see what it was about, what was he saying? He's saying that I am the best amongst various things. That's what essentially he was saying. So he was really pointing to this part. So he's saying that I am a manifestation at its peak. That's the kind of thing that he's talking about. In chapter 11, again, I have to say, it is, the chapter 11 is called Vishwa Roop Darshan. Vishwa means world, Roop means form, Darshan means seeing. So in some ways, what we are trying to do here is to actually see the world. It's a highly abstracted way of doing that in the diagram, but we're trying to see the world. And in chapter 11, he's doing it with words, and so much better than what I can possibly do. But this is an attempt of saying, what is the world like? And if you look at what he's doing, is that he's showing you not only about the center, but actually how the center operates in the world, what you see of it, or the entire glory of it. In chapter 11 in perceptual form, and in chapter 10 in more kind of descriptive or conceptual form. So that was just a minor point that I wanted to make. Next, now this one is a very big point. Okay, in some ways, this is really, I think, kind of culturally, this is the most important point. You can look at the history of philosophy, Western philosophy, as a duel between Aristotle and Plato, in a very simplified format, like a 100,000-foot level. What Plato holds is that there are two things. There is spirit and matter, which are very different, So there is a dualist. So the best way to capture that is dualist. Aristotle is a monist or Advaita in the Indian philosophy. Dualist in Indian philosophy is called Dvaita. What Aristotle holds is that spirit and matter do not exist separately. That spirit is manifested in the matter. And matter is driven by spirit, and it's the life in a baby, life in a plant. It is with matter. So it is this process of going back and forth which keeps it integrated. So there is an integration between spirit and matter. So it is not center versus the periphery. There is another simple way of saying that. If you look at this, what is in here, right? This radiant hexagon. What it is, essentially, it is saying yes. It is saying yes to existence. It is saying yes to yourself. It is saying yes to the world in the most fundamental way. You're saying you're accepting it. It's acceptance of the world, acceptance of yourself. This outside, this periphery here, is saying no. It is denying something about the world, something about yourself. It is saying no. It is turning your back. This is where the actual world is in this radiant hexagon. These are all various ways of turning your back on the world. There are many, many, many different forms of it. And we will go through several forms of it when we look at the fourth slide on the peripheral graveyard. But here I want to point out that Plato is right here. Plato is the peripheral graveyard of the idealist. Those are ideas which are dead, no longer living, and you're holding on to it. It pretends to be the center, but it's actually over here. People who are materialist are over here. They are holding on to materials that are produced by somebody who is actually living, who was here. But they are holding on to this. They are saying goods are here. That's all I need. These are subjectivists who are holding on to emotions. And all of them are trying to hold on to them by themselves, turning their back on this entire phenomena of life and world. So these are various forms of denial of the integration. Okay, so we'll go into details of this in the fourth slide. Now, one last point I want to make, and again, I want to now invite people to ask questions on this entire slide. Living this way, where you're continuously shaping the form with function, requires eternal rebirth. It requires you to be aware of everything you possibly can, noticing things which are at the edge of your consciousness. The edge, normally you will notice something over here, and you can evade it by looking away, or you can take responsibility and move towards this. So this is a way, the eternal birth. We did a meetup on Easter. Easter is all about saying, I'm going to give this up. I'm going to give up dead things which are no longer functional. And I'm going to refocus on this. And that is going to give me, that is going to produce resurrection. That is going to cause a rebirth in me, a fresh start. That's what Easter is about, of saying, this is dead. Everywhere, in all of these, you're saying, I'm willing to sacrifice these things which I was used to, because they are not, they're taking me away from the center. So you're giving these away, you're focusing on this, and that is what gives you eternal life. So eternal life is simply life according to the eternal. This is the eternal principle. It is a continuous process of rebirth. Another way of thinking about it is that it is your commitment to lifelong learning, of holding yourself as a variable, never getting attached to your thoughts, your emotions, or your habits, and saying that I will be alive. I will continue to learn. I will continue to transform myself as is needed. That's the responsibility that comes with it. So now I want to open it up for any questions from anybody on any of these points. So to recap, we went through Louis Sullivan's point about form follows function. So let me quickly draw all of these as a recap. So this is a function, that this is the process of creating the form. This is the form. And then if you do not watch out, these forms drift away from the function. So you have to let the life break in on you continuously and break out. That is the way in which you implement form follows function. This is the seed from which the tree grows. Initially, during this phase, it's a sapling. It is growing. This is the full-blown tree which starts to produce fruit, and it produces seeds, and it dies as well. It produces seeds and it dies. This is the same as Brahma. This is the center is the creation principle of Brahma right here. This is Vishnu, the fully implemented sustaining force. And this is Mahesh or Brahma, which is natural destruction. And all these three are natural, and there is a continuous process going on with it. In the Bible, I've already summarized. I don't need to summarize again. And this is all about, this is Aristotle. And dualist are various people over here, which are basically saying no. Essentially, this entire radiant hexagon is all about saying yes. Fundamental affirmation of the world, fundamental affirmation of yourself. And it requires tremendous responsibility of continuous awareness, eternal vigilance, as founding fathers called it, and willingness to give up things that are no longer serving you, sacrificing things in order to continuously reinvent yourself. It's all about lifelong learning. All right, so now I'll take questions. We'll start with, give me just a second. Yes, we're going to start with Jeff. Jeff, go ahead. Jeff, you need to unmute.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I understand what you were saying. You're saying yes. The way I understand is saying yes to the flow of spirit. No resistance, and watching the resistance as it arises, being conscious of the resistance. And you hear in spiritual circles for years, go with the flow. Well, just embrace the flow of spirit as it is and not want anything different than what is. And I found over the years, I've used just a process of inquiry. And anytime that came up with me, and ask myself, who is it that wants anything to be different than what is? And it begins to break down for me, breaks down the illusion of this separate individual who wants anything to be different than what is. And you begin to feel yourself more as the expansive spirit, more as the reality of who you are. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Next up is Joe.
So really quickly, if I were looking at this from a Platonist perspective, I would actually take the center out and make it its own, right?
No,
separate it. Oh, no.
Because the thing is that what I would say is that this is what Plato is. Plato is holding something which is a dead idea, perhaps something from the past, and calling it center. Calling it center doesn't make it so. It is right. Many times it's not even this, it is actually some kind of an emotion or some kind of a artistic construction that they are, but it is nothing to do with, it is separated out from the entire life. So it is a subjective, it's very interesting. There is actually a lot of commonality between Plato on one hand, like Platonic, for example, Hegel was one of the most idealistic philosophers. Him and Marx, who is a materialist, they actually think very similarly, and they draw a lot on each other because all of them are about goods are here, both at a material level, intellectual level, emotional level. It is not about what actually creates things. It is trying to grab results of the past. So there is always pretension because they have to use pretension of all kinds, but it is actually fairly small. Go ahead.
I just get the impression there's no room for spirit in Plato, but there is, it's just separate, right?
It is that they don't really understand any of these because the thing is that the thing is that if you remove the living nature of spirit, that what you have is something dead. And you may call it by whatever names and pretend that it has all kinds of properties, but whatever it is, there is nothing in here that Plato's philosophy knows anything about.
Right.
It is all playing around with stuff that is, it is basically what I call the peripheral graveyard. So he's a grave digger of that's the best way of putting it.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Joe. Anybody else has any questions before I go to the next slide? All right, let me go to the next slide. Just a second, yeah. Okay, now this is a very simple slide. In the first slide, I was emphasizing this integration, the radial integration. So thinking in terms of center to living form, this is the living form, and to dead forms. So this is the dead form, this is the living form, and this is the function, right? Now, I want to talk about another integration, and that is circular integration. We are beings. We have a mind, we have a heart, and we have a body. And unless you have all of these working together, you cannot be integrated. So you need all these three. If you choose to say that I'm going to focus only on my mind, that's not going to actually get you anywhere. You're going to, there is a tremendous tendency of going out like this. So this circular motion is the thing. It's, think of it as like a centripetal force. If there is no circular motion, it is difficult. It's almost impossible to go towards the center. If you focus only on your heart, there is a tendency of drifting away. All kinds of fantasies and all kinds of emotions. If you're focused just on your action, it's very easy to drift away into all kinds of habitual way. So you need rotating through all these, all the faculties, which we're going to discuss in the next slide. Reason I want to make this point is that in the next slide, we are going to look at these things individually. But the most important point is the integration between these and applying all these three things together, circling. So the circling motion, it's a crucial kind of integration. This going this way is one kind of integration. I should put it up to here. I mean, there is a natural thing that you will go here and then turn back. That's actually what happens. This is actually partly, this movement outward is like continuation of habit. You know, it's like the momentum that tends to take you away into this area, and you have to say, oh, I have gone too far. I need to turn back. So there is that. But this movement, which is a radial movement, is one kind of integration. This is a second kind of integration. And when you actually combine these two, what you really get is a spiral. So what you're getting really is a spiral. So you're moving continuously, you're moving instead of the circle, you are really moving like this towards this. So the movement for human beings is spiral. It goes through all our faculties. All our faculties are related to each other, and they depend on each other. So radial, this is radial, plus circular is equal to spiral. And if you're doing things right, you're spiraling inward. If you're doing things wrong, you're spiraling outward. Okay, so that's a simple point about saying that you have to engage all the individual things that we're going to be talking about in the next slide in this way, that you cannot focus just on one. You have to see the relationships between them and use them. So any comments, any questions on this slide before we go on? This was a quick slide. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. This is going to be really interesting. Okay, now this one, the best presentation of this so is very simple. I have done a full presentation on it. This is the mind, this is the heart, and this is the body. With the mind, we understand. With the heart, we love. And with body, we walk, actually take action. So these are the words from the Bible. So this would be like hearing the word here. This one would be believing or loving or having devotion. And this would be walking or, building a community, actually taking an action. In Bhagavad Gita, this is Jnana Yoga. This is Bhakti Yoga. And this is Karma Yoga. Okay. Now, each of these, especially Bhagavad Gita and the Indian corpus, has done a fantastic job of going into the details of each of these. And in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about relationships between how they work together, that one can have one more prominent than the other. So I always think of it as like 60, 30, 10, something like that. That, there are things which are dominant that you most people would either kind of approach the jnana as a primary thing, or some bhakti as a primary thing, some karma as a primary thing, but then you have to have the other ones, and other ones come naturally. So when you understand the ultimate, understand your own soul using Jnana Yoga, you love it more. That's the Bhakti Yoga. You also act in accordance with it. Similarly, when you love the core of your being, you start to understand things about it, and you start to act in accordance with it. Similarly, when you start to do the right things, you slowly develop knowledge about it, understanding of it, and you start to love it. So they all go together. So there is difference in which ones are prominent in who, but all of them go together. So these are the primary things that we've talked about. But the observation I had is that there are combinations. By the way, these three, blue, red, and green, are the primary colors of light. Primary colors of paint are different. These are primary colors of light. And these colors in the middle, like magenta, yellow, and cyan, are the colors that you get by combining the two. So when you combine the red and the blue, you get magenta in color. So the way I see it is that this is art. This is your expression using all your all your thought and emotion. When you put it together and express yourself, you create something which is beautiful, which has emotional appeal and intellectual appeal at the same time. So Gospel of John is a work of art. It has intellectual quality and it has emotional quality all in one. All great works of art are like that. So this one I call art. This one right here, you can call family or community. So with the combination of love and work, action, you bring it together to create a loving community, whether it is family, friends, things that are close to your heart, people who are close to your heart. So you build that. So that's the yellow. And this is the economy. Using your mind and your body, you create. So here what you do is that here you produce. So this is what you, this is your production, produce. Here you nurture. And here I call it recreate, because that's really the function of art, of giving you a new perspective, which takes you closer to the ultimate. That is art at its best. You can call it creation if you want, or expression, but I like to demand more of art, which is like recreate, understanding things better. So that is my take on the combination, how combinations of these three work. And I find them very useful. You can look at, for example, you can look at yourself and you can say, how good are you at each of these things? How good are you at understanding the true nature of life? Understanding, when you're thinking about understanding or any of these things, think of this hexagon as a whole. How well do you understand this? So that is Jnana Yoga. How much do you love this? What kind, how steadfastly are you pursuing it? How virtuously are you pursuing it? So this is virtue. How well can you express it in your own expression? How well can you nurture this with the people that you love? How good are you at producing the context on a large scale level, large scale economic level, to make it work for world as a whole? So you can ask yourself, how good are you at each of these things? So there are many ways in which you can use this diagram. There is a lot more to be said about this, because I've studied the Jungian psychological functions quite a bit, and there's all kinds of relationships here that can be explored, that I look forward to exploring. But this was the first cut, so I want to open it up for questions on this. We'll start with Joe. Joe, go ahead.
No, my question I think is invalid, because I was just about to ask how maybe Nietzsche looks at art, and that was completely different. It would have been completely different. So I just realized that. So sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. Does anybody else have any comments or questions about this? Ambika, go ahead.
So if what comes to my mind, each layer is really exquisite, and I'm seeing them, the three layered, one on top of the other, and I want to see what dynamic emerges. And what I'm feeling inside me is this is another way to develop a real aesthetic of oneself and the community, and a different and then new ways to communicate. And so this I find really very beautiful, especially when I layer them, because then you begin to see the totality of things, how you create yourself, recreate yourself, you go out to the periphery, you come back. And what an amazing discipline it is to really return to center with a new understanding from which you can go out again and make new art or whatever you create. So it's very lovely. So I hope to see a book with all these designs for different kinds of professionals, who will need this. Does that make sense? You're working on that too, right?
Yes, I'm beginning to do stuff. But thank you, Ambika. I really like your observations. So there are several things to be said. So firstly, I would say you can use it in individual context and in social context. So you can look at a person that you know, and you can say, okay, what are my strengths and what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses? So you can map them. So for example, let's say, let's take I'm going to go to another one here. So let's say you can say, look, my understanding, so this is actually in this diagram, towards the center is better. Okay. So now just look at the relative position. So you can say, look, my understanding is over here. My expression of being able to express myself is here. The love I feel is here, but the family is kind of here. My ability to virtuously act is here, and my economic ability is here. So I can draw myself like this, for example, let's say. Okay. I can look at another person and say, oh, you know what? Their ability is actually, thinking ability is here. Their expression ability, though, is not particularly good. This one, they are not that loving at the core. Their family life is here. Their economic ability is incredibly good over here, and their virtuousness is here. So you can actually draw things. So you can have like different levels, and you are able to kind of think about things and say, okay, where do I need to grow? You can ask questions like that. So there is a lot of work that can be done with this. And I look forward to doing that, because partly some of this has been done in the context of Jung's work. But unfortunately, because most modern thinkers think of things analytically, they end up focusing on things separately. They would say, oh, this person is just a thinker. And they don't see how that actually integrates and works with everything else as a being. And they kind of underestimate the power of this loop, which has the ability of transforming you. So they basically shortchange, the modern society shortchanges what people can actually do. So that's why I made a very big song and dance about the integration part. Because if you don't have this part, right? If you don't have this radial integration, you are sunk. No matter what else you get about these individual faculties, it's not going to help you if you're not focused on what is the truth, what is good, what is beautiful, and how do I go towards it relentlessly. Unless you have that in your heart, so unless you have this movement in your heart along every axis, no matter what you understand of things here or here, don't really matter. That's why I focus on this. Second part is that unless you understand that all of these are related and all of these play together, not only at an individual level, but in interpersonal relationships and how you relate to a group, your company, your culture, the world. How does that play out? You can't really understand it without understanding that all of this is happening at once. And if you do that, then actually this is quite useful. So thank you, Ambika. Great observations. Next up is going to be Rupali. Rupali, go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you, Shrikant. I really like this diagram that you made. Mm-hmm. What really struck out to me this time was you have the center, the mind, body, and heart, the Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, all of that And then the secondary colors to me are like the fundamental needs of humans, no matter what
Yes.
time period and when they live, where geographically they live, the needs are the same across humanity. So the need for family and community, once the basic needs of like shelter and food are achieved, the next level is that of having the community, having the ability to recreate, whether it's music, art, dance, literature, all of those are so fundamentally necessary for the human mind. And the ability to create, produce, and trade. So I think you've really captured it very well in this diagram. I'm very glad to learn about it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Rupali. Another angle on this, if you look at these primary axes, right? These are the ones which are basic human faculties. These are our faculty of mind, faculty of heart, faculty of body. What these are, as Rupali was rightly saying, is that these are actually human products. What do we do with it? By employing them together. So we nurture, we produce economically, we create art, we recreate our souls using our art. And that each of them have their own nature. And what this does is that it expands the model that Carl Jung has, which is focused, which is a psychological model. This kind of makes it external. It includes external things. It integrates that, not as a separate thing, but it integrates that in. So it's a more complex way of considering the human, human experience. Thank you, Rupali. Great comments. Next up is going to be Elena, followed by Jyoti. Elena, what do you think?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. It's going to come in together, and it's such an integrated point of view on different philosophical concepts. And my question to you, Shrikant, what's the devotion, if you had to describe it? And what another thing that you mentioned, we have attachment to things, physical things. We have attachment to emotions. And what kind of attachments would be in the physical, in the realm of body, what body is? So
sure.
Yeah, these are my questions. Thank you.
Excellent. So what is devotion and what is attachment? So devotion is basically called Bhakti Yoga in Bhagavad Gita, in Indian corpus. It is also called the Bhakti Yoga. If you look at the Bible, that's basically Bhakti Yoga. It's all about belief and devotion in Jesus. It is believing in Jesus, seeing the beauty of Jesus, emulating Jesus. It's all about Bhakti Yoga, focused on Jesus, just like Arjun loves Krishna. The disciples and anybody is invited to love Jesus. Devotion is a very important concept, and modern conceptions of emotions are very fragmented. They always focus on individual emotions which are reactive. Devotion is different. The best way of thinking of devotion is thinking of it in terms of a mother-child bond. The mother is devoted to her infant, her only child. She will do anything for it. She may be doing other things, but her mind is focused on it. Similarly, the infant is devoted to her mother. She will get excited by different things, but if the mother is not there, she will be completely distraught. That is what it is. It's the fundamental love for the core of your being, for truth, for God. Attachment is focused on these things. There are different kinds of attachments. Actually, you know what? I'm going to take this opportunity to just go through the last slide, because that's what it is about. I call it the peripheral graveyards. This is all about attachment. What happens is that we have ideas. Even the ideas that were good at one point of time, we get attached to them. And we don't let them go when it is time to let them go. Similarly, we have emotions. Even when they were right in their own context, we continue to have them. We harbor fear unnecessarily, anger unnecessarily, all kinds of things, anxiety, just all kinds of things. And we get attached to them. We see them as being parts of us. We can't think of ourselves without that. We have habits that are dead. We have kind of relationships, the way in which we've done it, which is actually not taking us towards the center. We are doing things kind of economically, which don't really add towards it. We are here, the best example of this is TV. We are kind of passively consuming art, which is shaping our souls in exactly the opposite way that it should. So these are all attachments. They're attachments in the sense that they are taking, you're here and they're taking you away from the center. Devotion is the movement towards the center. Attachment is a movement away. Thank you. Great questions, Elena. Next up is Jyoti. Jyoti, go ahead.
Yeah, as you know, I'm a woman of certain age. So I will say that this model is a very comprehensive understanding about the journey of a human being. By your attaching the labels of what is happening, you understand the processes that are taking place within yourself, and you can guide yourself when you're going astray. When you know the focus, what needs to be focused, that is your center, and what is driving you away from center. And you can put your finger on it, you can label it, and then you can say, now I'm at this stage, so I have to do something to bring myself back. And what can I do? So it's like a prescription here that you follow in your life. So I am simply mesmerized by this. Thank you so much, Shrikant.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. So I want to talk about this as a mirror. Think of this as a mirror. Okay, you're looking at yourself and you're saying, okay, where am I here? This is a way of actually seeing yourself. So you can say, okay, where am I? And you can look at it dynamically. You can look at your life as a whole. You can say right now, where am I? And you can see what is active. Is your mind active? What is in your mind? How good are the thoughts that are there in your mind? What are you doing? How are you feeling? What are you producing? What expression are you producing? So you can look at, on this axis, where are you? On this axis, where are you? On this axis, where are you? And you can see yourself going this way, so each of the axes, you can go ahead and see yourself. You can see your own journey. You can see that, look, initially I used to be kind of unnecessarily afraid of things. Now I'm less so, something like that. Or initially, I couldn't figure this out. Or, when I was younger, I was not that, I was taking more risk than I'm comfortable taking. I've become risk averse. Is that good or is that bad? So basically you can use this as a mirror because it allows you to think, and because it is all in one place, it allows you to look at yourself from multiple angles. And I find it actually useful to look at, for example, your ideals, right? You say, I like Louis Sullivan. So let's say Louis Sullivan, okay? Where is he on this? And you will immediately see that like his expression is like fantastic. So what I typically do is that, let me make it a little thinner. So I typically do is that if I want to use it as evaluative scale, I have a very simple scale here. So I put this like this right here, and one line here. So let's say this is the baseline, and you can say this is like 1 better, this is 2 better, this is 1 worse, this is 2 worse. So you can go ahead and you have like a 5-point scale to measure everything. So you can say that, look, Louis Sullivan, I'm going to use a different color, let's say. So Louis Sullivan is really fantastic on expression. I really love his expression. So he's almost here on expression. His emotion is fantastic. His thinking is good, but I have seen people who are a little bit better. I shouldn't say that. It's somewhere, but compared to his expression, his understanding of some things is not as deep. His ability in terms of kind of creating a loving community is not particularly good. It is kind of, it's over here. His economic ability was kind of middling. His moral action was amazing. So I think this one, I'm going to move it in a little bit. So he's kind of like this, something like that. So you can look at your ideals and you can say, okay, why is it that this person is my ideal? And it tells you a lot about yourself. You can look at your friends and say, okay, what are they good at? What can you learn from them? Sometimes you find that, okay, let's say that I am very weak on something. Let's say like Sullivan is, let's say he's weak on it. So if he's working with somebody who is over here at this level, let me use a different color. Use this color. So suppose he's working with somebody who will handle his business better. Though his ability in these other things is kind of middling, here also he's weak. So if they are a little bit better here, and they have something equal here, for example, though he may not get much value from this, he will get a lot of value from these. So you can look at, interaction between people at a personal level, at a professional level. So this allows you to evaluate that. So there are many uses that you can make of this. But thank you, Jyoti. Really appreciate that. Next up is going to be Ambika, followed by Joe. Ambika.
So as you say more about it, I just have more of these, feelings about the layered. I had a feeling you should have 2 more layers, and you brought out the 4th. So what I'm wondering is, when this is in action and its application becomes widespread in education and social structures and so on, what an opportunity and potential to cut down crime and violence and start to live with the understanding of we are all connected and integrated. and therefore create new environments and systems. And that's what I'm looking forward to. So we need several acres to start the experiment, right?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
The digital world makes for lots of opportunities, which can be done without too many acres. So I'm really looking forward to what can be done at the digital level. Joe.
You know, this actually reminds me of like a what's called a spider graph in a way, and that you can kind of put, you know, kind of score each one and see where you are. We had a presentation by somebody, and this is a very long ago, but he was scoring emotions. He was a very well-known, I think he does something at NYU. I forget his name. Anyway, but that would be adding values, actual values to this may be something where, you know, you can start to really put it together as a model and start to say, you know, where do I fall on my list of priorities and what am I really looking at, you know, with myself. You'd have to come up with I mean, it'd be a very involved thing, but is that even possible, or is that missing the point?
No. There is a lot that can be done with this. So I'm just getting started here. So that's why I appreciate all the comments that everybody is making. And I want to see, you know, I'm trying this out on, you know, with myself and seeing what it can do. And I look forward to doing kind of multiple presentations on this and see, because there is just so much depth here. So I'm not even begun to bring all of things that I've learned from Carl Jung into this. There are things, for example, ideas of axes. So for example, let's take this axis and this axis and this axis. So what happens is that most of the times, if you're strong on this axis, let's say, suppose you're strong on this axis, you will tend to be weak on this axis. Sometimes if you're strong on this axis, you're likely to be weak on this axis. Something like that. There is all kinds of interesting energy dynamic between axes. There are ways of measuring these, kind of self-measurement, all kinds of things. The challenge is to kind of keep it all integrated and kind of focus on that. So it's like, how do we do that? That is the real challenge, because it's very easy in the modern mind. You can just go and analyze everything to hell, you know, cut everything up so that it is dead and it's no longer living. And what you have is some piece that was something at that point, but it is no longer kind of operational. So so there is a lot of work that I'm planning to do, and I'm planning to do like maybe 2 or 3 presentations on taking different aspects of it. So one, I will just look at these these axes and see how can I apply all the lessons from Jungian psychological functions to this, and which ones are wrong. There are things wrong about it, like Jung's approach. Jung himself is actually much better than most of his followers. So MBTI, there is a lot of stuff in MBTI where it's very mechanical application that doesn't really respect the complexity of human beings, their ability to change, all kinds of things. So to avoid all of that and to kind of bring it back and to keep it as alive as we see Bhagavad Gita or Gospel of John or Tao Te Ching is, that is the challenge. So to achieve the detailed grasp of things while maintaining the integration. And I'm still working on it. I've always struggled with that. It is a very tough problem, but I look forward to working. And Joe, appreciate any comments and any kind of back and forth. Really appreciate that. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Rupali. Rupali, go ahead.
I'm going to piggyback on what Joe said. I think this, this diagram is more like a living document of yourself on a day-to-day basis. You can kind of, just like we plan our weeks and our calendars, this is like planning of your own self or diagramming your own self and how close you are to the center or how far away you are from the center. And you can track the growth. This is something like what Ambika said, is you can track the growth of a person by plotting this hexagonal graph. And Rohit and I were just saying about MBTI, what you said is absolutely right. It's very fixed. But this allows you to grow, to develop skills, to say, okay, where can I make myself more balanced? All of those aspects happen in this diagram. So I think this is a very living, it's a living diagram. It's like what Bhagavad Gita says, you are a living being and you have to have that growth towards the center. So
Excellent.
those are my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you. There were more than 2 cents. Excellent. Thank you. I would make a couple of things. I think adding these axes, these secondary colors, I think is a very big deal, because what it does is that it is actually something external. You can say, okay, what have I produced in terms of art? What have I done in terms of the economy? What have I done in terms of building a community? And you can go ahead and look at it objectively outside of yourself. And you can then integrate it with what is happening inside. So the other thing I wanted to point out is that if you look at it, this is all inner world and this is all outer world. So this is the integration between inner and outer, and how they go together. So there is a lot of relationships here that are brought together. So like being able to think of what is happening inside you and what is happening outside you and seeing the connection between them, that is huge. So there is a lot of things here that I'm trying to put in, and because it's one diagram, there is a power to it, and it forces you to keep track of other things when you're focused on one. So suppose you're focused on your thoughts, you can see that there are these all of these other things are still around. So you can't really ignore them. So it's a way of kind of maintaining the integration. At the same time, I have made this part, this radiant hexagram, really prominent. And to say that, look, don't forget the form. That form needs to follow the function, and just keep that in mind all the time, because all of these colors are really dark colors relatively, and most people get fascinated by those, but the light is all here. And so don't forget that. So it's like focus on the center, but you can't really focus on the center of the center. You have to look at how the center is functioning your life. How is it shaping your life? Wonderful. Rupali, you had a follow-up, and then we will go to Preeti, followed by Brian. Rupali, go ahead.
Yeah, I do have a follow-up. I look at this diagram and I think, okay, so the primary colors are you, the center of every person, right? And the secondary colors are you in the periphery. So this diagram is like a dance of the center and the periphery. That was just my follow-up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rupali. Let's see, Preeti had a question. Preeti, do you want to ask it live, or would you like me to? Can you please clarify economic? What does this refer to exactly? Let's see, is Preeti unmuted? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just a little bit confused. I have like two different definitions in my mind.
Mhm.
So yeah, I was just like the way you're explaining it with your chart, all the different aspects. What exactly are you referring to with the economic aspect?
Sure. So what I'm saying is, so let's look at that. Okay. So we're talking now about this part. What is this? This is basically saying you're using all your mind in order to figure out human action at the widest scale. And you're trying to say, what should you make? How should you structure things? So here would be abilities like planning would come here. So this is your ability to plan, plan to produce, to organize. All of this is about applying your mind to the problem of human action. And that's what I'm calling, in short, I'm calling economic. So this is basically, this has to do with your work. You'll be using this faculty a lot in your work, in actually producing things. Don't know whether this is clear. Go ahead, Priti.
Yes, that does clear it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Brian. Brian, what do you think?
I think it's really quite amazing. I like the 6 different dimensions. The as others have said, personal capacities, and then interactions or expressions. The one thing you touched on, I wouldn't say incidentally, but as part of the presentation, was the forms. And you had the destruction of forms going up. When you talked about the Bhagavad Gita and also in other contexts, the destruction going out, you drew an arrow out into the periphery. And that's why I held off until you talked about the periphery to try to understand the these. Then I guess what my understanding is, and then I'll ask the question. My understanding of that particular point is that these are forms that still exist, but they're not useful or helpful to you or others.
That's
now,
correct.
The other part of it then is when we have these, what I call, you didn't use this word, but the virtuous circle between the inner and outer, when you go out and are, manifesting, when you're trying to realize the word in the world through or express your devotion to the center in the world, like that. I think that can I think that also implies the creation. Doesn't that also imply the creation of new forms which are useful?
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll answer both the questions. So the first one was about the peripheral graveyard. Okay, so these are basically what happens is that forms are created by functions, and then they stop serving any useful purpose. So they still remain there. They are like, for example, these are ideas. Sometimes they had no reason for being, actually. They were just created as rationalizations. Okay, so there are things, these are ideas that are not towards the center. They are no longer serving, or never did ever serve. There are emotions like fear, unnecessary fear that somebody might have. There are things where people can be very destructive to community. There can be people who are just doing habitual things or random things, drifting without having the virtue of action. There can be people who are just using up consuming without producing anything. So these are all examples of things in the peripheral graveyard along all of these 6 different triangles. So those sometimes they could be valid, but many times those are actually devices which the people who came up with, where they came up with for the purpose of destruction. So there are rationalizations that were never meant to actually give you understanding of truth, but to take you away from the truth. There is hatred, which is opposite of love, which is over here. So there are all kinds of things like that. So there are, in the peripheral graveyard, there are 2 kinds of things. One, things which were once did exist on the living form and then drifted out. And the 2 kinds, second kind is ones which always had a destructive purpose. So those are 2 kinds of things. Now, your second question was about new forms. Absolutely. So that is the whole point here. So the thing is, there is this loop. This going out is the seed being transformed into new form. This going back is evaluating the form to see whether it is still consistent with the spirit, with the function. So the creation of new forms is this thing going out, is this arrow going out. And it's the continual creation of new forms is needed in order for the spirit to operate. That's how spirit operates. There is no spirit. So the other part of it that I want to stress is that there is this continuous action. There is this continuous action. It is not, it may seem like a hexagon, but it's actually going like that. And what you're seeing as a hexagon are temporary pieces that are there, which are being continuously in the process of destruction and creation. So there is this vital dynamism to this entire, so that light field thing that you see here, this whole light field thing is full of activity, of arrows going out, going like this and coming back. Brian, does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Right. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Rupali. Joe.
So the economic example that you gave makes sense to me, because that's essentially where there would be like the material and the efficient cause, right?
Mhm.
Where you're bringing something into being. And that's kind of where that would lie. And that's kind of where the modern approach to the world is only focused on that particular category. Am I thinking about that correctly?
No, what are you saying? Can you repeat it one more time?
So basically, where the material and the efficient cause and the economic, where you drew the economic line
Right.
for, I forget, Preeti's question right there.
Yeah.
That's kind of where the modern perception of the world kind of resides. Is that
That's a
correct?
good point. That's a very good point. It is the 2 things. So in the modern, let me go back to the this peripheral graveyard, and let me try to draw what I think is different between what we've been studying in Bhagavad Gita, Gospel of John, and the modern world. So clearly, you look at America today, what we are doing here is spectacular by any standards. We're just doing amazingly well in transforming the world. And this is exactly where it is. Now, unfortunately, what is happening here is not fully integrated with this, with this part, oh, just a second, with this part or this part or this part or this part or this part. So it is largely focused on this. So that's why I was stressing the importance of having all of these things go at the same time. Now, it is not, I'm not saying that this is true of everything in the modern world. Of course not. But we are talking about like modern world at 100,000 feet and trying to compare it with other times. So what I'm saying is that virtue, like virtue is the core concept here. That's not part of the modern discussion. Self-knowledge is the core concept here. That is not part of the modern discussion. Love is the core concept here. Devotion, okay, this kind of steadfast devotion, it's not part of it. Emotion, yes, modern world is subjectivist, but all of these are like fleeting emotions over here. Art, of creating art which gives you ability to recreate your spirit. That's what art is. That kind of art, not there in the modern world. Family, community, it's very serious problems in that. So you can see that while it is just incredibly good on this, it is lacking in these other things. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. And I've actually been looking at models that have captured exactly what you just demonstrated, certain economic models with reprioritizing how we even look at what is valuable, what's growth, and I can share it with you offline, but
wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rupali.
So I'm going to go back to what Preeti was saying about what does it mean, the economic part. It's the human action, so your action that creates value for yourself and for others in the community. So that's the economic part, that, you know, you're creating something that is valuable to you, and then it adds value to the others, enhancing the community that you live in. Thanks.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderfully put. Absolutely. All right. So I want to invite folks to give any final thoughts. I plan to develop this quite a bit. I'm planning a meetup perhaps on Sunday, definitely on Wednesday, to do follow-ups and kind of take this in great, in various directions, because this is just a start. This is like a very quick overview of what I had. I look forward to developing this, but I would love to hear what you got, what you thought of this whole exercise. What do you think of the diagram? What do you think of the description? Any comments, kind of overall comments are really welcome. Go ahead, Evanik, followed by Jyoti.
Yeah, I love this presentation. I really liked the part where you talked about economics and that being planning and work. Because thank you, Preeti, for asking that question, because I had a totally different concept in my mind. So that was great. And also the reflectiveness of this, that you could judge how you're doing based on the scale that you had up, like the different points, like where are you on this point and where are you on that point? I thought that was amazing. So that way you can like take an honest, objective view of where you're at in terms of, and I like that it was in terms of your family and your community, and like where are you in terms of your heart, because that would keep you focused on the center, and you can see areas where you're moving away from that, and you can also judge for yourself, what does that mean? Like, what does family mean to you? So it just requires a deep dive after hearing all of those questions. So I just thought it was great. I'm looking forward to more. I can't wait to see what you're going to do next with this. I think each one of these could be like their own meetup and just like focus on that, especially the part where you're evaluating yourself, because I think that's something that's definitely needed. And I think it helps when you can bring yourself to the presentation and you can do the work. I think that helps. So thank you so much.
Wonderful, thank you. So I like the evaluative part. So again, folks, if you have any suggestions about the direction in which you would like me to develop this, go ahead and suggest. So I'm going to make notes right here so people can see what I'm doing. So evaluation, definitely, I think that has tremendous potential. You know, I have a lot of experience with this, with the Jungian functions. I used to run, when I first discovered Jungian functions, I was so excited. I ran meetups. I would get about 80 people showing up every time. And then I would divide them into groups of 4 with different kind of functions. They were like, Jung has 4 functions. So people with this dominant function and this dominant function and this, and when people from this interact with this, what happens, all kinds of stuff. So so there is a lot to be done on that. So definitely evaluation. So tell me what folks, tell me what you thought of it, what I can improve, where you would like to see it go. Just tell me, and I will incorporate. I'll listen to everything and I'll figure out what to do next. Jyoti.
Yeah, you know, since you're asking for suggestions, I didn't see your including the role of soul and you know, the reincarnation, like how it never dies, that always stays there, and the body, you know, is there any planning? Are you planning to do something entirely different for that?
Sure,
Or
sure. The soul is right here. This is the soul.
right.
And the whole thing is driven by soul. So we're talking about nothing other than soul. And there is the reincarnation at a different level. So this is like reincarnating yourself every moment or continuously, like, you know, of rejuvenating yourself continually. I mean, I don't have plans to talk about, you know, death. I don't know much about that.
All right.
Thank you, Jyoti. Next up is Joe.
I like this a lot, and I think that there's a lot that can be done. I think actually naming the categories, like inside the categories, like so the white, then the just soul, and then just actually putting names to them might actually make it a little bit more clear. And then for the categories themselves, which ones, and then like maybe a short definition to each one, so that would that would just be a little bit more helpful. I mean, I'm writing it down anyway, but it just would make it a little bit more clear. And then I have an example that I can send, actually, that might be helpful.
The naming is absolutely a great point. The thing is that naming is like the final culmination of a lot of work. And there are temporary names that you use, but they keep on changing all the time until you go towards it, because actually capturing something in a name is a tremendous achievement. And I don't want to take shortcuts. I want it to remain kind of a little bit suggestive at a point. So this is clearly, when the current names I have here is like mind, heart, body. If I want to look at actions, I can say understanding, love, walking. I'm saying walking here. Here I'm saying recreate. Here I'm saying produce. And here I'm saying nurture. So in terms of actions, these are the actions. but I will keep on working on those. Thank you. Next up, go ahead.
Maybe even like inner and outer as well. I mean, and then the white within the white diagram, like what that actually.
Right. Yeah. You mean naming things here, you mean?
Yeah, or right on the border.
Okay. So yeah. So the name for this one is really functionated form. This is like a fully functionated form.
Okay.
So this is functionated form. I'll probably end up using Louis Sullivan's definitions as a starting point. So this would be the function. You can also call like spirit and matter. And I want to keep it. One thing is that I'm deliberately using different terminology so that people can switch based on whatever context that they have. So very good. Thank you. Next up is going to be Ambika, followed by Brian. Ambika.
So Shrikant, in your first slide, the last point, I don't remember the exact words. Is that where you're talking about eternal movement forward or evolution?
Right. What I'm talking about, let me just bring that up. It is eternal rebirth. So that means that you're going back to the center and this movement out.
Right.
The birth.
Yeah. So I just wondered if this might answer what Jyoti said about the soul, bringing the soul back in. But I also following up on what Evanik said, wondered if in the process of going deeper into in practical applications or whatever, whether you wanted to try role play with people here. I just thought.
There's a lot, yeah, there's a lot of things. That's a good idea. Thank you.
And finally, its application in well-being and health situations.
Thank you. Thank you. So let me do kind of interaction or something like that. So interaction between people. Thank you. Next up is going to be Brian, followed by Rupali. Brian.
So I could just as well ask this as a question, kind of along the lines of what Jody said, but I think you're looking for suggestions now.
Sure, please.
The suggestion would be it's really in line with Jody's, define the center better. Because you've used the word like the word of God, truth, beauty, and goodness. She used the word soul. I think the center can be understood in many different ways. And just the reaction I have is that that's also very worthwhile exercise for, defining what that is for each individual and for groups to make this thing, work.
Thank you. That is the hardest thing. It's basically the Tao. So you're saying that, tell me what the Tao is. And the Tao Te Ching starts with Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. Similarly, this is like saying that, I want to see the Father, God the Father, or I want to know the Brahma, or I want to know the Atma. And in some ways, this entire exercise is about getting to the center. And my capability of speaking about it is very limited. I've not found too many people to be able to do that. Like Naneshwar starts his Naneshwari by saying that, look, I can barely call out to it in these, babbling words. That's pretty much as I can do. And that is absolutely true for me as well. So that's the hardest thing, because you're trying to look at the principle behind everything. You're looking for the Tao. And but
maybe then to talk about the nature of the center without really defining it, just exactly along the lines you just did.
Exactly. So I will keep doing that. In some ways, this entire presentation is just about that, because you can understand the center only through its manifestations. It is not this by itself. It is this entire thing, like this entire loop. And what is it that is driving? How is it driven? So it is kind of seeing the whole. It is saying spirit as manifested. You can't understand the spirit without its manifestation. So matter and spirit together is what we're talking about. And this is the classic problem. This is the problem that Tao Te Ching talks about. This is the problem that Gita talks about. This is the problem that Jesus talks about when he says that no one has seen God. So that is exactly. And what you do is that you keep talking about it like we have been doing. So thank you. I don't know. That's the best I can do, Brian.
No, I think that's perfect. I think that's great.
Thank you. Next up is Rupali.
So Shrikant, I have 2 points.
Mm-hmm.
The first is a suggestion for a meetup. The secondary colors that you've added in this.
Mm-hmm.
It really helps understand how a person functions within the periphery while still remaining close to the core or close to the center. So I think spending more time on that would be helpful. That's one point. And the second, the more I look at this diagram and the more I listen to everybody talking about it, I wonder if this is the direction for what Yasuhiko was saying about spirituality, new spirituality, or spirituality for the new age.
I will go ahead and send this, once the video is done, I will send it to Yasuhiko and find out what he thinks.
Sure. Because I feel that without having the dogma and the rituals, at its basic level, it's very simple, and it highlights everything about how to interact in a meaningful way and live a life of purpose with, the devotion, the work. I mean, it brings together everything. So that is my thought. Thank you.
No, absolutely. I agree with both the points. So I'll take the second point first. Absolutely, because what this is that this is summary of what I have gotten from Bhagavad Gita, Gospel of John, and Tao Te Ching. And it is completely consistent, by the way, with everything I know about science and good science. Okay, great science. Not okay science. Okay science is more peripheral stuff, but really great scientists have all of these things firing full blast. All of the artists, great artists, have this property as well. And this is definitely about spirituality, and I think it is far more accessible, easily accessible than most of the spiritual works. It also focuses on the commonality, common patterns of the spiritual traditions without getting too much into the specific details and specific doctrines and specific rituals. So it's a very powerful way. I agree with that. Secondly, the idea of these secondary colors is my idea. It's really new idea, and I'm really looking forward to build that up, because I have not seen, I have not heard it anywhere else. And so I look forward to doing, I'll probably do the meetup. I like the idea of doing, so in terms of the suggestions, there is certainly, I think the secondary colors is a great way of doing the meetup, because that's really the new thing here. I want to also, I think the idea of doing kind of evaluation, interaction is very good. I'm going to hold off on the naming part because it's going to take me time to name it right, because in any case, it's an iterative process. Every time I'm writing these names and I'm rubbing them out and coming up with better names all the time. So I will keep on naming. So naming will proceed as a byproduct of all these meetups. But what I'm thinking of doing is to do something on secondary colors, and then the issue of kind of evaluation and interaction, because that will be a way of actually for people to play with this and talk about how they see the use of it, because I would like to see how people use it. So that's what I'll do. I'll probably do this on Sunday, or either one or both of these together. the secondary colors and using this as a model on Sunday, probably at 3 o'clock is what I'm thinking of. There is an incredible meetup we planned on Sunday at 1 o'clock. There's a guy called Gary, and he has been doing a master's thesis on one point in Gospel of John. I don't know what college he is at, but his college has several professors who are experts on Gospel of John. And he's doing a master's in theology. And his master's thesis is on the meaning of Jesus washing his disciples' feet and giving them the new commandment that you love one another, and the meaning of that. And he traces the precursors of that in the Old Testament. And he talks about how Gospel of John is different, because he's been spending a lot of time studying Gospel of John with all his professors. He's done several courses on that, and he's going to be doing a series for us. So that's going to be very, very special. And that's going to be the first part of that is going to be this Sunday at 1 o'clock. So I invite you for that. And then following that, I will do something on this diagram. I have some ideas of my own, but the two top things that I got from everybody here is doing kind of a way of saying, okay, how do you actually use this in kind of evaluating things? And second is the secondary colors. All right, folks. So thank you very much. Really appreciate all your feedback, and looks like this is a keeper. So I'm very, very delighted. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for doing it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for doing it.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you, Shrikant. This was wonderful.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.